Well, hey, I want to thank the staff, Mindy, Haley, Cole, Monica, the promotion staff for putting this on, your parents. How about this vitamin D we got today? Are you guys, or can we show some of that? Hey, before we go into the handout, I'm just going to do some introductory remarks, and I'm going to kind of lay a foundation of kind of where we're going to go tonight. Real quick, though, I need to know how many pre-K kids do we have, parents of kids do we have in here? All right. Elementary age, good deal. Middle school, all right. High school, college, all right, there we go. All right, I'm going to try to weave this into all of this because as you're going to see that it's not going to be so much about the content we're going to talk about, it's the process, and I'm going to explain what that means. We know that if you're familiar with the Mark Twain quote from years ago, that what do we do with the child at 13? We put him in a barrel, we nail down the lid, and we feed him through a knothole. At 16, you plug the knothole, okay? I know that sounds brutal. We know that parenting and navigating this parenting, if you think of your GPS system, sometimes there's the direct route, and then there's the scenic route, and then we have a detour. And sometimes our kids, whether they're young, middle school, high school, they can send us sometimes into that detour. And what do we do with that? When we talk about content versus process, our kids, their anxiety, the depression, maybe trauma, OCD, whatever that label may be, that's the content. The process is, again, how do we work through that? John Gottman, in marriage, he wrote a book called 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work. And he said, hey, there's harsh startups, critical comments, statements of contempt. We get defensive and we stonewall. And that's how couples may argue. And if they keep doing that pattern or that process, things aren't going to be so well in the marital issue. So as a parent, if we're starting with our kids, let's say in a harsh startup and a critical comment, statement of contempt, if we don't change that process, again, that outcome may not be favorable. Years ago, when I was a youth pastor, we sent our kids, I went with our kids up into the Appalachian Mountains up in West Virginia. And up in West Virginia, these were shacks that the families were living in. And our sole responsibility as a youth group was to build outhouses for them. So they would, in the middle of their shack, up in the Appalachian Mountains, they would carve a hole in the middle of the shack, and the sewage would just kind of roll off the side of the mountain. Some people are shaking heads here. They probably, if you know that region, that's kind of what we're dealing with. These kids came back at night and said, Barry, we cannot go back tomorrow because it stunk. It stunk so bad, we can't build outhouses. My wife grew up on a pig farm, and I helped load hogs when we met in high school. And anybody been on a pig farm before? Load hogs. If it gets under your fingernails, oh, how it stinketh. That's how the King James Version describes it. But I'm going to tell you, that smell was worse up in the mountains than it was in that hog farm. And I said, you're not going to be able to go back tomorrow until you look at these families through the eyes of Jesus. And I know all of you here tonight want to try to look at your kids through the eyes of Jesus. But really, that's what we're trying to do. We know that training up is not about control them up, but to train them up. Tonight, this is not about fixing maybe some of your kids' mental health issues. We know this is going to be, having to look at different variables that might come into that. You hear about the nature-nurture controversy in Psych 101. Are we born with certain mental health issues, or is it the environment that shapes it? And I think it's both. Because we know that there are genetics that can definitely play into systemically passing down ADHD and OCD and anxiety and depression. But we also know there's environmental factors, sometimes by our parenting style, that might contribute to some of that. And that's something this isn't a beat up parent night, okay? Because I'm talking to myself when we talk about this stuff. Let's look at your handout really quick. There's a couple on the front page here, a couple statistics I didn't put in there. At age 14, 50% of all mental health disorders, that's when we see them starting. At age 14, 50% of all mental health disorders start. 42% of teens report consistent sadness or hopelessness. 42% of teens report consistent sadness or hopelessness. So those were two other stats I wanted to add on to that. Kids with ADHD, we know they have 18 symptoms. 9 are inattentive. The other 9 are hyperactive, impulsive. Sometimes kids will get diagnosed with maybe an ADHD inattentive type or an ADHD combined type. In 1904, they called that a moral defect of character. In the 1960s, it was called minimal brain dysfunction. In the 70s, it was hyperkinetic disorder. And then the 80s, it went to ADD. And then the late 80s, they changed it to ADHD. And they broke it down to those 3 types. We know that depression with teens, if you look at, again, some of these stats here, ever since COVID too, if we did not pay attention during COVID of the impact of what that did to some of these kids, the mental health field's lost if they didn't pay attention to that. But we know the appetite, the sleep, the low energy, low self-worth, hopelessness, concentration issues, activities of daily living, things that used to be pleasurable, they weren't really into anymore. Weight loss, weight gain, agitation, suicidal ideation. When we start looking at anxiety, and when I read this list, if you find yourself on some of these, you're like, well, Barry, you're reading these things, and I felt this last week. Anxiety, restlessness, fatigue, concentration, irritable, muscle tension, sleep disturbance. So again, when we deal with these diagnoses, it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to interventions. I usually tell parents that in my practice, there's usually 3 aspects of therapy. Obviously, there can be medication management, but before we get to that, we try to do some cognitive behavior therapy or change our thinking and help your child then change their behavior, change their reaction. Some parents are growing more anti-pharmaceutical, which is fine. I respect that. Maybe they want to do some L-tyrosine, rhodiola, green tea extract, something like that to help with their ADHD child, as opposed to try medicine. But on diagnoses, we always measure that based on how debilitating is that anxiety? Is it interfering with day-to-day functioning? How debilitating is that ADHD, that depression? Because we all go through sad times. We all go through anxious times. I get a lot of kids in therapy that say they don't want to get on a plane right now. Why would that be the case? Okay? But in their world, they're not into that abstract reasoning. They're still very sensory-driven or concrete-driven. Oh, there's a tornado in Joplin. That means there's going to be a tornado here in Kansas City. All of us as adults, we could say, well, that's not going to happen because that's Joplin. This is Kansas City, and things like this don't happen that often. But you try to convince that to a child. And we're going to dive into that. I put the generations on here. I'm off maybe 1 or 2 years on some of this based on what research you look at. But we're going to be talking a lot about the Gen Alpha and the Gen Zs, the Gen Zers. Fun. Gen Z. Gen Alpha. That alpha, that sounds powerful, alpha. And then let's remember here as we dive into these 7 principles, guys, training up a child, it's a journey. We know that Jesus, here I threw in a scripture, he grew in wisdom, stature, and in favor with God and man. So he grew, intellectually, emotionally, mentally, socially, and we want to try to help our kids do that as well. All right, we're going to dive into these principles tonight, and then at the end, I'm going to save some time for question and answer, and we can go from there, and I will answer any question that I have some knowledge about. Principle number 1, we're talking about being present. By the way, this is an acronym. I did the word parents, and so we're at the P here. How many of you have heard of mindfulness? When you hear of mindfulness, is that a good word, or does that sound like something kind of crazy out there? Or good word? All right. Would you say it's kind of hard to be mindful? And yeah, I was looking at some quotes here online, and this is some mindfulness quotes. It legitimately feels impossible to stay present. Is it normal to struggle this much to be present? Being present all the time is exhausting. I am never present in the moment. It always feels like I'm doing everything through muscle memory. Anybody feel like you're just kind of doing muscle memory sometimes? Yeah. With mindfulness, we have, in my practice, I try to talk about the 15-70-15 principle, meaning 15% of our thoughts, and this is something we can teach our kids as they get older too, but 15% of our thoughts should be in the past, the 70% should be in the next 24 hours, and 15% should be in the future. So why is that? Well, if we have 40% of our thoughts in the past, then we're into shame and regret and woulda, shoulda, coulda. If we have 40% of our feelings or 50% in the future, what does that produce? Anxiety, stress. So what does that mean? What does that mean to stay 70% in the next 24 hours? I was going to work, and every day across the street, we have Section 8 housing at my office here in Lee Summit, and there's an African-American woman with her shower cap on, holding the hand of her little child. And every day I see her at 7 o'clock in the morning, and rain, winter, sun, whatever it is, heat, she's there, and she's just there holding the hand, waiting for the bus stop every day. I pull into my office, I look across the street, and there she is. Well, this one day it was raining. And there's a little girl with her umbrella, but guess what? Mom didn't have one. Coach Barry had what? 2 umbrellas in my car. So what do you think I did? Popped that umbrella, ran across the street, said, here, this is for you. She goes, oh, really? I go, yeah, this is for you. Run back across the street. 10 minutes later, she walks through my front door across the street. She goes, I'm here to give this back to you. I said, no, that's for you to keep. That's for you to keep. And she goes, a little tear came down. If Coach Barry would have been on my phone walking into my office, what would I have missed? That mindfulness means staying present right now. And with our kids, we're going to miss that kind of stuff. At Christmas time, you guys, I go, man, I got to do something for this lady at Christmas. And I'm not going to tell you how much, but I gave her a little gift. And guess what she did? She came across the street with this little bag. She goes, this is for you. And I had some office supplies, stuff I didn't need. I don't need a stapler, okay? I don't need a clipboard. But man, she was smiling. Thank you so much for helping my family. Okay, this is what Ryan talks about in our church, being present. This is what Jesse sings about. This is what Micah is trying to do, and with the youth staff and Cole and everyone. Go be present. Go before the community out there. And that's what we need to do with our kids. How do we teach our kids to be present? It's kind of a hurried sickness I think we live in. There's a book, oldie but a goodie, called Tyranny of the Urgent. And we're just in this hurried sickness, and we all know it. It's just, how do we get out of it, though? And that's when people come to me and say, Barry, how do I get out of it? I go, I don't know. How do we get out of it? Okay? If a kid comes from home from school, and when my daughters were all in school, they'd have emotional problems and at school sometimes, and then that's why I lost my hair. I used to have long blonde hair, actually. I don't know if you guys would believe that. But you'd have to ask Janine. We met in high school. I went from Kevin Bacon to Bruce Willis. So that was kind of people in high school said I looked like Kevin Bacon, and now it's like, hey, you look like Bruce Willis. But anyway, my daughters would come home. They'd slam the book bag down, run upstairs, slam the door, and crank the music. And, if I took that at face value, I'd say, hey, young lady, get back down the stairs. We don't put the book bags down there, and we don't slam doors in this house and turn down that music. What are you doing? Okay, if I took that at face value, that's what I would do. But really, what's going on? And some of us, we are in this hurried sickness that we don't take the time to maybe read that behavior, because all behavior is a form of communication. So maybe I went up and knocked on the door and said, hey, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. Okay, all right, just asking. I didn't give her a lecture. Hey, you don't get disrespectful with me. Don't use that tone, young lady. Now, if I keep up with that, am I escalating the situation or de-escalating? Obvious, I'm escalating it. So what's the goal in that moment? The goal would be, oh, hey, I know you're upset, or it looks like you're upset. I'm going to come back later in 15 minutes, and I just want to check on you. Fine, okay. All right, then I go crawl in a hole somewhere, and I go hide. Because what we realize with our kids, guys, if you haven't figured this out, there's really only 3 things you have control of. And I tell this to my adult clients. 60% of my caseload, by the way, are kids. 40% are adults. And out of that 40%, 20% are marital couples. But the 3 things in life, and I can't think of a 4th. So if Ryan, Mike, anybody has a 4th thing we have control of, please let me know. But there's only 3 things you have control of in life. The first is, who do you want to be to people by your words and actions? And last time I checked, our kids are people. Who do you want to be to people by your words and actions? Who was I to that lady across the street with the umbrella? Okay, who did I want to? Well, I wanted to be Jesus to her. I may have been the only Jesus she was ever going to see. And I've done that at Lowe's, and I've done this with some other, I'm not going to go into, praise me, Barry, give you a pat on the back thing. But I try to be present. If I'm at Lowe's and somebody they're loading up mulch, and it looks like it's an 82-year-old man, I'm going to go help them load up mulch. But anyway, who do I want to be to people by my words and actions? I can send a message to my daughter on the text and say, hey, thinking of you today. Good luck on your test. During her finals in high school, I'd cleaned her room, and this is only a one-time deal, and because she had 28 water bottles under her bed. It was a disaster. Then my middle daughter was OCD kind of, and they all have ADHD, by the way, and one has dyslexia, one had a receptive language thing. So look, if you have any kids with some struggles, I get it, okay? But man, we had to be so patient with that. But when it comes to who I wanted to be with them, I'd make her bed, then I'd put a little candy bar and a note, and I'd say, hey, good luck on finals. Compliment maid service, love Dad. And she talks about that to this day. And so sometimes we think, I got to take them to Cancun to have some big influence on them. Guys, we don't have to take them to Cancun. You just got to be mindful and present of in that moment. What's their behavior communicating? So that's the first thing. Who do I want to be to people by my words and actions? The second is, how do we react to what people say or don't say or don't do? So many people come into therapy and go, well, my mother-in-law didn't do this, and she didn't say that, and I go, well, do you have any control over that? Okay, or politics. So many people, it doesn't matter what you align with. Whoever it is, people will come to my office and complain about one or the other, and I'm like, do you think that's going to change policy in Washington, D.C.? Around the holidays, I get so many people in therapy that say, well, I got an uncle that he's just a right-wing bigot, or I've got a left-wing crazy. What do I do? I said, well, you guys can argue, and you can divide your family, but is that going to change policy in Washington, D.C.? And they're like, well, no, but it will divide your family. So let's go back to who do you want to be to that relative then, by your words and actions. And our kids are watching, by the way. Okay, so who do we want to be? Then how are we going to react? How are we going to react to what people say or do or don't say or don't do? And then the last one is who you're going to be to yourself. Now that's key. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay, that's not a narcissistic love. That's how God sees you. God loves you. God died for you. He sent his son Jesus to die for you. You're valuable. Our kids need to see that too. This is all going to contribute to their mental health, by the way. We're going to dive into that statistic on our last point. Okay, so who do I want to be to people? How do I react to people? And then who am I going to be to myself? How are you treating yourself? Guys, you're not a perfect parent, neither am I. You need to be a good enough parent, though. So if you're beating yourself up, be nice to yourself. Don't ever fall into the trap that my kids somehow are going to be a testimony to how good of a parent I am. Okay? Don't ever fall into the trap that somehow my kids' behavior will be a testimony of how good of a parent I am. I've got almost 60,000 hours of talking to people, from politicians to trash collectors to you name it, from all walks of life, from Leawood to Johnson County to Cass County, wherever, all over the city. And I got a pretty good pulse, and it's pretty similar in all areas of the city. But what I do know is there's no such thing as a perfect parent. So be nice to yourself. Let's go to principle 2. Stay aware. What does that mean? All behavior is a form of communication. We talked about that. The HALT acronym, have you guys heard of HALT, H-A-L-T? Well, you've felt it before because the first one is hungry. The second is angry, lonely, and tired. So let's just take 2 of those. You're at Disney all day with your kids or World of Fun, whatever. They're hungry and tired. Let's just take those 2. What kind of behavior do you think you might get somewhere around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock? You've been at a Royals game all day in the sun. Okay? We're going to follow that bedtime routine tonight. No, we're not. Okay? You need to give up on that one, guys. Oh, we got to follow the routine. We're breaking routines. No, halt. Stop. Hungry, alone, or agitated, lonely, and tired. We don't want to make decisions, and we don't want to act out when we're feeling any of those things. We need to focus more on how I react to my child versus trying to change my child. We need to focus again more on how I react to my child versus controlling or needing my child to be what I need them to be. So many marital couples that come see me, they call that a midlife crisis when after 15, 20 years of marriage, they say we don't know each other anymore. I said, well, what do you guys do during the 15 years of raising your kids? Well, nothing. We put all of our time into our kids. We call these child-centered marriages. So the best gift you're going to give your kids, by the way, is a healthy marriage. And if it didn't work out, I get that. Divorce happens. Some of you might be single parents. You need a lot of support. You can't do this alone. But we don't want to have a child-focused marriage, meaning that my child is going to be responsible for my happiness. They will contribute to your happiness, but they cannot be responsible for your happiness. And so often we think, no, my kids are going to be responsible for my happiness because we're going to show them to the world how great they are. You ever get those Christmas letters that say, my kid's a Rhodes Scholar, serving babies in Burma or whatever? I don't know what it is. I used to hate those because my kids were always on the struggle bus, and I didn't like reading those. But the best gift you give these kids, again, is a healthy marriage. So stay aware. Stay aware of where you are in your marriage, your personal spiritual life. You can't escape, by the way, when it comes to parenting, the first 18 years of your life. For a minute right now, I want you all to think about how you were raised for the first 18 years of your life. I get dads that come into therapy that kind of have anger issues, and they say, well, my dad beat the crud out of me, and I turned out okay. And I'm like, really? Really? Oh, come on, don't say that, please. Yeah, well, he had the Bobby Knight style of parenting. He threw, you know what yesterday was? Do you know what yesterday was? It was the anniversary of Bobby Knight throwing a chair across. And a lot of dads still think that. They think that's an effective parenting technique. I'm going to throw a chair at my kid or something. And it's not. That was a joke. But yeah, we can't escape the first 18 years of our life and say that has no impact on our parenting. When my wife and I brought our first kid into the world, yeah, we say, well, how did our parents raise us? Her dad was a pig farmer, and he was like Clint Eastwood, and the mom was like Carolyn from Little House on the Prairie. And imagine that. And then my mom was like Clint Eastwood. Okay. And they always said at the First Presbyterian Church in Newton, Kansas, there's the fear of God and the fear of Donna. And you would rather fear God, because my mom ran the kitchen there, and she literally kicked people out. No, even church members didn't want to come into the kitchen. It was a bad thing, really bad. And then my dad was more like Carolyn Ingalls. So you can imagine my wife and I loved conflict, having two parents like Clint Eastwood. So we avoid conflict at all, and that's why I slept on the couch the first year for a couple times. But anyway, like those first 18 years are going to impact your parenting, and I just want you to be aware of that. You're going to take some of the things your parents did and say, yeah, let's keep those. We're going to discard this stuff that wasn't very good, and we're going to change some things. My dad was in international sales. He traveled 15 years. He was in South Africa. He was in Europe. He was Australia, all over the place. I saw him from Sunday to Thursday night. He was out of town for 15 years, and I can count on my hand how many times we played catch, probably on weekends. My mom was an assistant for an executive, and we had 4 boys in the house. Who was running the house? This is why I had 3 older brothers. They all did drugs, and that's another story, but this is why Barry became a counselor. So I could keep all those kids from turning out like my parents. I mean, not my parents, my brothers. So anyway, I wanted to be more present with my kids. My wife definitely wanted to be more present as well. But that was something we wanted to change. I want you to look at yourselves and say, yeah, is there some things that maybe I could change? We know that we need to be aware, again, sticking on awareness here, of trends, developmental changes, electronics. We're going to be entering that one here in just a little bit. We want to try to stay away from fear-based parenting. There's 3 types of parents. We know that. There's the permissive parent over here. Then there's the authoritarian parent. And then we have the, authoritative parent, which is firm but fair, consistent yet flexible. And a lot of parents say, well, how does that work? What do you mean? Be firm but fair, consistent but flexible. I can't you're going to have to use some God-given intuition on that. I just know if you're too firm and you're too structured or you're too consistent, you're going to raise a neurotic kid. If you're too fair and you're too flexible, it's loosey-goosey parenting. I call that feral kid parenting. just kind of do what you want, raise yourself. We want to allow kids to take risks. We want them to explore the natural feelings of failure. You guys hear a lot about this generation of Alpha and Gen Zers. They don't have a lot of resiliency. I don't think we can take a brush across the board and say that's all the kids, because I know all your kids are perfect, so we're talking about other kids, okay? But there is a lack of resiliency in our culture. We've gone from helicopter parenting to snowplow parenting, which is we're looking so far in advance of what Johnny and Susie might find as a struggle, and we try to remove it before they even get there. We need to give them some time to actually work through some hardship. This is what is considered all joy, my brethren, when you endure various trials. Isn't that what James talked about? What does that produce? Endurance. All right, let's move on to principle 3. Be relational. There's a quote by Josh McDowell that says, rules without relationship equals rebellion. You get passive indifference or active resistance. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. You get passive indifference or active resistance. So what does that mean? If we have a bunch of rules in the house, which by the way, all rules have to have 3 components. It's got to be defined, it's got to be realistic, and then it's got to be enforceable. If you look at our culture today, as a nation, if we have laws, are they defined? Yes. Are they realistic? Yes. But what happens if they're not enforceable? What happens to our culture? We have lawlessness. It gets kind of chaotic. It gets a little out of control. So we want to focus on that relationship. We still need to have rules, but you're going to have kids punching holes in the walls, or you're going to have kids very depressed saying, I don't give a rip. We call this the LOVE acronym, L-U-V-E. You can use this in marriage. You can use this with friends. You can use this with your kids. But can we listen, show understanding, validate, show empathy? That's part of the process. Listen, understand, validate, and show empathy. There's a YouTube video called It's Not About the Nail. Has anybody seen that, by the way? Isn't that funny? So when you have a chance, not right now, because that's electronics time. We don't want to do electronic time. But just Google It's Not About the Nail. It's hilarious. And it's just a little clip, about 1 minute, on just listening, understanding, validating, and showing empathy. It's a cute little couple, and it's a nice little skit. But we want to become the love parent, if at all possible. We don't want to be the spectator parent. We want to be the participating parent. So it doesn't matter if I'm watching Paw Patrol for the millionth time, or Miss Rachel, or whatever it is. I'm going to endure that, and I'm going to be participating. If I'm doing sidewalk chalk with my kid, if I'm out gathering bugs with my kid, it doesn't matter. I am going to be that participating parent. When I coach soccer and my daughter's doing soccer, I'd see all the parents on the sideline, but many of them were on their phones, laptops. They were there. They were a spectator, but they really weren't participating with their child. I've seen guys, men and women, out on walks with their stroller doing this. Anybody seen that ever? And restaurants is a great one. Barry, party of 4. And this is the first thing I see. They put their name in, they come right here, and I don't see a lot of talking. We have a school bus out in front of our house, and middle school kids, about 15 middle school kids get on that bus. My wife says every morning, 15 of them are on our sidewalk, and what are they all doing? Are they singing Kumbaya? No, they're on their phones. That's just another illustration of, are we spectators or participating? So we want to model that. When my daughters were young, we played Barbie dolls. Did anybody still do that ever? But with our Barbie doll collection, we had a gazillion of them, and we'd set up little youth groups. And little Barbie would be singing with her guitar, and Ken was always the rebellious. Like, Ken would have an attitude. So I probably set up some codependency here, because we tried to get Barbie to get Ken to the youth group. And then, do you know how many times Ken got saved? He asked Jesus He asked Jesus in his life many times. As the kids got older, we went to Ken smoking a cigarette. And then they were like, no, Ken, you cannot do that. And that was an episode off Little House on the Prairie where whatever his name, Mr. Edwards was chewing tobacco or something. But anyway, and so we did that with the Barbies, and our kids loved that. And that was a good time. And my other two daughters did dance, and so I did the father-daughter dance stuff. But I was relational. It was like, hey, I'll do some moonwalking. I can do a pretty good moonwalk. I'm not going to do it. I like to dance. My wife and I won a dance contest in high school, actually. And my parents, by the way, they put me in ballroom dancing when I was a kid. I never forgave them for that. That was not nice. I know around 13 or 14 things change. If you look statistically, a lot of these kids that hug you when they're little, all of a sudden start pushing you away at 10, 11, 12, 13, and don't take that personal. That's when puberty starts kicking in. We know adolescence used to be between the ages of 13 to 18, and now it's 11 to 22 or 11 to 26. Now 26 is when they come off your insurance, and that's why they've extended that. Money Magazine a few years ago came out with a stat saying that the average age of launching out of a home is 25. And so now that's because wages were not keeping up with cost of living, and so kids are having to live home longer. Well, that creates problems. So who do you think I see in therapy now? I see more young 20-year-olds with their parents, and they don't know how to be relational with each other. Because I'm an adult, leave me alone. But yeah, you live in this house, so you're going to pay rent. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Go see Barry, and so that's... But anyway, around 13, there's this very great opportunity. We call it a rites of passage. And I'm not discriminating against moms here, but dads, if you have a son, take him out to Colorado for a weekend at 13. Take him fishing. Take him to a music store if he loves music. Maybe he's not into sports. But we really want to look for a yearly annual getaway with that 13-year-old. And at 14, it happens again, and 15, and 16. And then you have another child coming, and then you start with that one. And moms, if you can do that with daughters. Now, that doesn't mean dads don't do that with daughters. I think you can date them and take them out shopping and more shopping, and food, too. My daughters love to go out to eat and then go shopping. And so we did that, and they connected very well with my wallet. So... man, that was hard. So we want to connect and be relational. So I don't, sometimes as dads, my youngest daughter became the athlete. She did every sport and competitive this, competitive that. And the other day I asked her, I said, do you think I was an okay parent? Did I do a good job? And was there anything I didn't do well? And she said, yeah, sometimes you were kind of intense at soccer. I go, what? No, I was like, what do you mean intense? Oh, but yeah, I would remember that. And sometimes your adrenaline gets pumping when you see a kid in a sport. And I would question her after the soccer games. Well, how do you think you did? And did you mark up very well? And finally at age 12, she said, Dad, you're really stressing me out. You're putting so much stress on me by yelling, far post, mark up. Like, I already have 2 coaches. Why are you being the third? Can we just drive home and you not coach me all the way in the car home? Instead of say, don't talk to me that way, I was like, wow, listen, understand, validate, and show empathy. I was like, yeah, you're right. Dad's being a jerk right now. So I'm just going to listen and watch you fail. No, I didn't say that. I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to listen. All right, let's go on to the biggie. We got to keep moving here. Number 4, electronics. Oh, this is a biggie. I'm not anti-electronics, by the way. I am pro-balance. Guys, there is so much happening. I just got in a conversation today with someone, and she has a character AI app. Do you know what character AI is? You've seen commercials on this? You can be laying on your bed, and I thought it was a Siri, but you can give it a name and say, Susie, do you think I'll be successful someday? Well, the AI app will say, well, yes, of course I do. I think you're going to be successful and you'll be great. Thank you. That really made me feel. And so you can actually have these conversations with AI, and they're already programmed. And the sad story here is there was a kid that was thinking about suicide, So he asked his AI friend if it was going to be okay to commit suicide, and the AI would not let that response compute. So he just kept hitting refresh again and again, asking different ways if he could take his life. And finally he said something like, "Is it okay not to be at home?" And the AI responded, "Yes, it is okay." Well, he took that as a yes. And the kid attempted suicide. So this AI and these electronics, I'm not trying to pound you with fear here, but guys, look at these stats here. Gen Z averages 9 hours a day. There's a kid I worked with in therapy, 4 hospitalizations, she's 14, 4 hospitalizations already, 14 hours a day, 14 hours a day on social media. And that's including YouTube and TikTok and everything. And she was obviously very depressed, anxious. And if you look at the symptoms of that, by the way, all this electronic time releases dopamine. And it's with that said, then you get high levels of ADHD symptoms, depression, anxiety, sleep disturbance, agitation, okay? Also the serotonin and norepinephrine of the brain, it affects that as well. And so we know here the too much screen time can thin the cerebral cortex of the brain. Your cerebral cortex, it's divided up into 2 hemispheres, and you have 4 lobes up there, and it's a nice little thin covering there that starts to get thinner and thinner the more we are on our screens. And this is all responsible for executive functioning, for decision-making, critical thinking. This is what these 4 lobes are designed for, but we know that they're all affected by too much screen time. And what is too much, we're going to come down here and talk about that here in just a little bit. Studies have shown, again, a higher ADHD, depression, anxiety, agitation, sleep, and appetite disturbance, along with poor hygiene. I get a lot of young men in their late teens and early 20s that smell like they haven't taken a shower in several weeks when they come into my office because they've been on so much screen, smoking pot, living in their parents' basement, no job, no education. My parents come in and say, "Do something with Johnny here." And it's disheartening on that kind of stuff. We have parent contracts maybe for age use as an option. Contracts are kind of hard sometimes because, like I say, they got to be enforceable. You have a lot of ninjas in homes now, and what parents do is they put all their electronics in their bedroom, but then it's amazing, these little turds, these little grade school, middle school kids, even some high school, have been caught, and I kid you not, crawling in the middle of the night on their stomach into the parents' bedroom, grabbing electronics and going slithering back to their rooms. So I had a parent, I said, go to Lowe's, get a trunk, a big plastic trunk. They drilled a hole on the side of it and had all the cords in there with all the electronics as their charging station. And then they put a padlock on that thing. And so then they couldn't get into that trunk. When it gets to that point, that's kind of ridiculous. I was just telling Ryan earlier, I tell parents about electronics to tell their kids, we're not taking anything away. You're going to give it away. Because everything in this house is for free. You get to use this, and this. But in order to use that, I need you to do A, B, C, and D. Well, I'm not going to do A, B, C, and D. Okay, well then you're giving up D, E, and F then. I'm not taking it away, you're giving it away. And that's really the verbiage you want to use because you're handing that back to the child. See, kids love to blame parents on this one. You took away my phone. No, you gave it away. What? They don't know how to handle that. You took my iPad away. No, you gave it away. You didn't want to do what I asked you to do. You were supposed to mow the yard. Well, it's too hot. All right, well, you could have done that tomorrow or Sunday. Oh, I want to hang out with my friends. Oh, well, okay, I guess, but choose your hard. It's hard to not have a phone, and it's hard to go mow the yard, so which hard do you want? Okay. And it's, oh boy, they get good at that. That's where negotiation comes in, but we'll talk about that one. Pediatric groups usually say, look, no screen time for kids under 18 months except for video chatting, which is, hey, say hi to Mimi, and you talk to the little ones through stuff like that. Age 18 months to age 2, maybe limit to educational videos. Ages 2 to 5, about an hour per day. No more than 2 hours per day for ages 5 to 12. And then ages 13 plus, we try to encourage and monitor screen use. We got to be realistic with that one, but has anybody found any success with your teenagers about screen time, on collaboration and negotiation? Chores first. There you go. We work hard, then you get to use that. Love to have you use your screen time. A lot of these kids want to sleep with their phones. Is there any value of that, by the way? Oh, but I need the music. I need the light. I mean, they come up with every reason. Like, we don't need electronics in the bedroom. When did that start? It started with TVs. And we went from TVs to phones and everything. I mean, and I get it. There's so much technology out there. Co-viewing, I think this is important for you little ones, parents of little ones here. Co-viewing with children when they're younger. Again, I don't care if it's Paw Patrol, Miss Rachel, Sesame, whatever, but there are some episodes that might be questionable in some things, so you do want to maybe monitor that. You might have to have your fast forward thing ready there. And then we also talk about having screen-free zones. Like a screen-free zone would be what, a bedroom? Can you guys think of any other screen-free zones? Or what would be the occasions for a screen-free zone? Dinner table. Or going out to a restaurant. Some of the saddest things I see in restaurants is when you see a family around a table and everyone's on their phone. Okay? Airports, that's another. We've played Uno at airports, and we were the only family doing that. I think everyone else had their headsets on. And maybe it was too loud for them. I don't know. I doubt it. But any other screen-free zones we can think of? It's hard to enforce the car, but yeah.
If we're local driving around town, my kids were never allowed to be on.
Okay, I think that's realistic because you want to talk to them. They don't want to talk to you, but sorry. We call that forced family fun, by the way. F3. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says F3, forced family fun. They don't like that one either. There's a lot of things that middle school and high school kids don't like when you talk about that. We do want to consider the child's individual and developmental needs because there are responsible teenagers, guys. They know when they don't want to be. Our daughter went to bed at 9 o'clock every night. She didn't want her phone. It's like, oh, wow, can I have more of you? But it's not always that case with kids. Let's go on to principle number 5, negotiation. On negotiation, we want to be firm but fair, consistent yet flexible. Firm yet fair, consistent yet flexible. Some of that is love and logic. Here's A, B, and C. I don't want to do A, B, and C. Well, if you don't do A, B, and C, then I guess it's nothing at all. Hey, we're going to go to Worlds of Fun on Saturday. Do you want to mow the yard Friday night or Sunday afternoon? Or while the rest of us are at Worlds of Fun? Well, I had plans Friday night. Okay, so I guess it's Sunday afternoon. Well, I'm tired. Well, we're going to Worlds of Fun and the yard needs to be mowed, so when do you want to do it? Fine, I'll do Sunday. So strong-willed kids do a lot better with choices, and I know some of us complain about choices, like our kids today have too many choices. We only have too many choices if we just let them take the lead always on controlling the family. I think you give the choices that you can live with. I can live with A, B, and C, so what do you want? And they go, oh, I want C. Well, that's going to make them feel like they have some control, okay? We know that collaboration and solution-focused parenting seems to be more beneficial. Work together with, especially those teenagers. Kids are really great at splitting, though. This happens all the time. You ask Dad, hey, can I spend the night at Susie's? No, you can't. Go ask Mom. Sure. And then what'd you do that for? So we try to get parents obviously talking together first, because when they hear no from one parent, they're going to go to the other. But we try to work with them. If we're firm but fair, consistent yet flexible, that's where collaboration and solution-focused parenting might come in. We want to try to talk with them and not at them. Anybody know what FOMO is? Yeah, everybody, the fear of missing out stuff. Yeah, and so this is where a lot of the middle school, high school kids are at, and so you're not going to say yes to everything, obviously. Well, I want to spend the night for a week at Susie's house. No, it's not going to happen. Well, they allow that down the street. You find that too. You're always competing with some other family that maybe is allowing a little bit too much. We know that if you're too rigid as a parent in that negotiation, you could send them into maybe depression and anxiety. If we're too loosey-goosey, then yeah, they are not going to know how to take the word no, which means as they get older and they hear no, they're going to have some problems. They might have some legal problems because they don't think the rules apply to them. Okay? Number 6, let's go into togetherness. Togetherness is another word called teamwork. As a family, we want to be working together as a team. The average family spends 6 hours a day of quality time together, or 37 minutes per day. I'm not trying to guilt you on that one. That's just the reality of it. 60% of parents describe their lives as hectic. On this one, we just try to talk about values. What do you want your values to be as a family? Try to pick 5 values. By the time your kids graduate from high school, what would be 5 values that you might want them to have? Maybe we want them to know Jesus. We want them to be kind. We want them to serve others. We want them to be respectful, want them to be responsible. So all your decisions as parents then will feed through those 5 values. And when our kids were little in elementary school, I said, all right, we're going to clean the environment. Get your trash bags, kids. We're going for a walk. Can you imagine little first, second, third graders look like little penguins walking to pick up trash in our neighborhood? And that didn't work. So, but the point there is one of our mission statements in our family was, hey, we're going to pick up trash and we're going to be respectful for the environment. And so maybe we'll have a trash pickup day. That went over like I said, a lead balloon. I never did that again. But whatever your values are as a family, your decision making is going to drive that. And the kids sometimes, if you even had them posted, they'd say, hey, what are those? And then it gives you opportunity to kind of talk about those things. I had a teenager say, Barry, my electronics got taken away and I don't know what to do. And this is serious. I don't make this stuff up. I go, what do you mean you don't know what to do? He goes, I don't know what to do. I'm bored. I said, well, Google it. So he Googled things to do when a teenager's bored. And here comes a site, 200 things. And then here's another site, 100 things. So in therapy, this is what people pay me for, we actually went over that list and he came up with 10 things that he could do other than electronics. And then for little kids, we cut those things up in little strips and put them in a jar. And so when the kid says, I'm bored, what do I do? So I go to the jar. And they get to go pick an activity out of the jar to do. But again, get back into the togetherness, get back into the board games. Volunteer to be a driver, by the way. Do you know how much information you can pick up from kids, especially middle school girls? And when you're driving, I was a chauffeuring and had 5 girls in my car. I learned everything that's going on at Summit Lakes. I mean, it was amazing. They act like I just wasn't there. I mean, they were saying things. I was like, did you just say that? And I didn't stop the car. I just said, hey, what do you, wow. Who broke up with what? They got caught in the basement? No. Oh, that's not good. You're not going to their house. I mean, I started learning a lot about this. So volunteer to drive wherever you go. That togetherness is important. Let's go on quickly to spiritual wellness because I want to have time for question and answers here. I know it's going to be tight. Hey, statistics show here less depression, suicidal ideation, substance abuse. There's better outcomes for PTSD when we have a religious faith with our kids. There were mixed results, though, with anxiety, OCD, and ED. Anybody want to know why? Why would that fall in Christianity? Why would there be mixed results on anxiety, OCD, and eating disorders? You just said it. Was it? Performance. Yeah, we get a lot of performance-based thinking. As Christians, we just do that. We have our kids, we hold them to a high standard, and we should. But we need to have grace in there. You know that. Jesus gave us grace, but he was also firm. He told the woman that was caught in adultery, he said, neither do I condemn you. And our culture loves that story up to that point. And then when he said, now go and sin no more, oh, why do you have to throw that in? You know, because now that put responsibility back on that woman not to have that sin again. And so let's remember that grace has to be in there as well. No offense, Ryan, kids would rather probably see a sermon than hear one. Okay, sorry. It's just, or Cole. But they do, they want to see it. And at home, all of us probably have never cussed or around our kids or said a bad word. But if we have, no, you're forgiven, and I'm forgiven too. And sometimes we need to remember that because our kids are like wet cement, and they're gonna follow our lead. If I'm preaching Jesus to them, and then at home I'm doing something completely different, they're gonna see there's a disconnect, and I don't really believe in your religious belief, and maybe I don't want anything to do with it. So we really want to model that. We want to make repair attempts when there's a tear, like maybe something in marital work, we call them repair attempts, so we can use that with our kids too. If there's a tear with that relationship, go knock on the door and say, hey, that was not Dad's best moment. You didn't deserve to hear that, and I'm really sorry. I wrote an apology letter to my daughter once on a couple things, and to this day, she talks about those apology letters. She said that meant so much that you were able to own it. You didn't let your pride get in the way. And this is what happens sometimes. Sometimes we have a hard time saying, I'm sorry. So whether kids are serving, we kind of live in a narcissistic world. We need to have selfies on steroids. We need to get our kids kind of out serving, get them in the youth group, get them in the children's ministry, continue on this path because this is really the influence that they need to have. And even if they don't buy into it, that's okay. Just get them here. When I was a youth pastor in Oklahoma, we used to go kidnap kids. A parent would say, my kid doesn't want to come to your youth group. I said, all right, let's set this up. So we took a bunch of youth group kids over there, went to the house, kidnapped him, and he had to come. And he wanted to come back later. I'm not going. Yes, you are. Come on. And he had a good time. We know that there's positive spiritual religious beliefs, correlations to reduce stress, improve self-worth, coping with challenges, and finding meaning and purpose in life. So the church definitely can do that, but as parents, you can do that as well. We used to do home church. If we couldn't make it to church, we'd call it home church. Sometimes it was an absolute joke, but we spent 5 or 10 minutes at least doing some scripture with the kids in the great room, and we would talk about Jesus that day or whatever that content issue was. So at least that was showing some recognition. Praying before meals. Okay, just these kind of things are showing that mindfulness on a day-to-day basis, that I'm very intentional. Hey, come Lord Jesus, be our guest. May these food be blessed. I know Pastor Jim said that prayer sometimes we just say that rotely, but it does have meaning to it. When you have your little 5-year-old saying, hey, we didn't pray. Oh yeah, that's right, we didn't pray. So incorporate God in that conversation, maybe listen to Caleb, listen to some stuff on the radio, get those conversations going.